What's up, everybody? It's Jordan, and welcome to the Sports Suit Hine Show. Today's April 28th, 2021. I am live on YouTube like every single video I do. This is actually, I believe, my sixth or seventh video of the day today. In today's video, I am joined by a special guest, Frank of the Unofficial Bengals Podcast. How are you doing today, Frank?
Jordan, thanks for having me on the NFL draft.
Yeah, cannot wait to talk about the NFL draft and trying to have somebody on the whole week. Lots of people have been busy and everything. Really appreciate you joining, especially last minute. Cannot wait to talk about it. There's lots of different topics to talk about. But before talking kind of about the draft itself, there was a trade a couple of days ago and it involved, we're both Bengal fans, and, it involved a team in our division and involved the Baltimore Ravens. The Baltimore Ravens actually traded an offensive tackle, Orlando Brown, to the Kansas City Chiefs. The Ravens received a first-round pick this year, a third, a fourth, and also a fifth-round selection next season. Where the Kansas City Chiefs received Orlando Brown, a second-round pick this season, and a sixth-round pick next year. What were your thoughts on the trade, and who do you think ended up winning the trade?
Jordan, I'll tell you, I think the Chiefs ended up winning that trade because they have a starting offensive lineman in Orlando Brown. And the Ravens, now they're starting to worry me a little bit as a Bengals fan. They have two late picks. I don't know if they have enough ammunition to move up to 4 and grab Chase, but I know they're going to be hunting for a wide receiver. So if they can't move up to 4 and ruin our plans, I can see them getting into that 10 through 12 spot and trying to grab, like Waddle or Devontae Smith or one of those guys.
Yeah, to me, I think this kind of benefited both teams. The Baltimore Ravens, they're getting they get 2 first-round picks now, which is very beneficial to them because, they desperately need a wide receiver. They have not had a wide receiver eclipse 800 receiving yards since 2016, which, is absolutely insane. But at the same time, in my opinion, the Baltimore Ravens do not you can get Rashad Bateman, Chris Marshall Jr. from LSU. It doesn't really matter, in my opinion, what receiver they get in the later rounds. They're never going to be that team who passes the ball an absolute ton. That's just not the way their system works. But they have a chance to get a wide receiver and a replacement for Orlando Brown with having 2 first-round picks. Number 27, I kind of expect them to take a wide receiver with that pick. Somebody in mind to me, I think it's Kadarius Toney. I really like Kadarius Toney. He's one of my favorite prospects in the draft. But I think that's an amazing fit. But with their second first-round pick, I really expect them to take an offensive tackle, a guy to replace Orlando Brown. But overall, I really think both teams benefited from this trade. But I actually kind of think the Chiefs won this trade because you look at the Super Bowl, Mahomes was scrambling for his life every play. Mahomes scrambled actually more yards in that one game than Joe Mixon actually had rushing yards the whole entire year last season. And it's just they signed Joe Thuney in the offseason, which to me that was I kind of thought that was going to happen after they some of their guys, and then you trade for Orlando Brown, who's one of the better tackles in the league. And you have a better offensive line that you did have last season. You get all your guys back, aside from Sammy Watkins on offense. Would not be surprised at all if the Chiefs make it back to the AFC Championship game or the Super Bowl after that move.
Without a doubt. I mean, that was the biggest problem in the Super Bowl. Mahomes looked like Joe Burrow out there. We saw Joe Burrow get destroyed by defensive linemen, and that's what happened in the Super Bowl. Mahomes kind of came back down to earth because his offensive line wasn't performing. Now they signed the best guard available. They traded for a really top-notch tackle. Who knows where they're going to go from here, but they made every effort to fix that problem that haunted them in the Super Bowl.
Moving on to another trade here, it was, yesterday I actually had the chance to talk to Denver Broncos legend Carl Mecklenburg, and we were kind of talking about what the Broncos may do, in the draft, his thoughts on Drew Lock and everything like that. Last season, I was really, really high on the Denver Broncos. They ended up being 5-11 and was last in the AFC West. And some Bronco fans have mixed feelings towards Drew Lock. And so, the Broncos, they're kind of not even totally on the Drew Lock train. So they trade with the Carolina Panthers, and they get Teddy Bridgewater for a 6th-round pick. To me, this is a very questionable trade. I thought Teddy Bridgewater to Miami Dolphins easily made the most sense. But what are your thoughts on this trade? And you think the Broncos could still draft quarterback at number 9 despite this trade happening?
You know what? I think the Broncos are going to stand pat this year. I think they're going to keep Locke as a backup. I think they're going to start Bridgewater. And can you believe it? Like a 6th-round pick. That's what I mean with these. People trade for these late-round picks, and it's almost meaningless. It's almost like a dump of salary. Obviously, we knew Carolina wanted to get rid of Bridgewater. And, here the Broncos are taking him. I think that kind of takes them out of the quarterback derby unless maybe Fields or Lance falls to them, but I'm almost feeling like they're going to trade back down again from number 9 and try to bolster the rest of that roster. What do you think on that, Jordan?
To me, I'm not completely not sold on Drew Lock. To me, I had a very, very, very stupid decision last season. I was dumb enough to pick Drew Lock as my MVP. I know that sounds absolutely insane. But, what the offense Denver Broncos have on offense, they have a lot better roster than people think. Melvin Gordon, I know he's not great, but, he's a decent running back. They had Phillip Lindsay, but he's not with the Houston Texans. Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, KJ Hamler, Noah Fant, Albert O. They have a decent offensive line. I'm not ready to count out Drew Lock just yet because you really look at last season. I cannot remember his record last year, but his record's actually kind of deceiving because there was about 3 games he played last year when he did not even finish a game. I know the Pittsburgh Steelers game. They were in that game. Drew Lock gets hurt, and they still nearly beat the Steelers with former Bengal quarterback Jeff Driscoll playing. I really think Lock has an opportunity. If he's, I think this may bring the best out of Drew Lock because I just really think Lock will have a decent year. Now, I know I picked him to be MVP last season, and that was just stupid. But I think Lock's going to have a good season. I think this will bring the best out of Lock and Bridgewater. But honestly, I do not completely think this rules out Denver at taking a quarterback at 9. I think it's the chances before this trade happening, if Justin Fields was there, I would say it was about a 95% chance happening of them taking Justin Fields. Now, to me, with this trade happening, I would say it's probably about a 20% chance. Justin Fields is dropping for whatever reason. I don't think Trey Lance is available at 9, but I do think Justin Fields will be. But it's going to be really interesting to see what Denver does with their quarterback situation.
Jordan, great point because you're right. You're right. There's a lot of pass catchers there. I don't know if Lock's going to get playing time. I really think Bridgewater's going to beat him out. But regardless, you do have a decent passing game to work with there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Denver, to me, is definitely one of the most intriguing teams, upcoming this season, especially in the draft. Speaking of the draft, that's basically this whole episode's about. We kind of talk about the trades to begin off here, but it's just we're less than 24 hours away from the draft. It is absolutely crazy. I did my round 1 NFL mock draft, my final one, just a little bit over an hour and a half ago at 8 p.m. to make it 24 hours. From the draft, I had some interesting selections there, and it's really interesting. Me, number 1 is going to be Trevor Lawrence. Number 2 is going to be Zach Wilson, the quarterback of BYU. But who do you think the San Francisco 49ers take at number 3?
All right, everyone's saying they're going to take Mac Jones, and he fits with the Kyle Shanahan style. But I don't know if you could pass up on Justin Fields there. I know people are predicting him to go later in the draft. But for some reason, I'm feeling like he's a winner. He has the intangibles. He has both the legs and the arm to do it. Probably 70% Mac Jones, 30% Justin Fields.
Me, I've kind of had Justin Fields, Matt Jones, and Trey Lance even all kind of mocked to the San Francisco 49ers the past month. And, I remember I was doing an episode with Blake Jude, and we were talking. This was before free agency even started. And I mentioned, watch out for the 49ers trading up for a quarterback. I said Zach Wilson, but, obviously Zach Wilson, he's going to go to the Jets. But this was something I really expected the 49ers to do was trade up in the draft and get a quarterback. To me, I feel like the 49ers, they already know who the guy is. Anybody who says it's down between 2 or 3 people, I just think that's a false report because you have to 1,000,000,000% know who you're taking at number 3 to trade all that draft capital. It means 3 first-round picks and many other picks as well. Realistically, I honestly think it should be Trey Lance. I like Justin Fields quite a bit, but to me, I think Trey Lance, he's not quite as pro ready as Justin Fields. But I prefer Lance a little bit more than Fields. I think it should be Lance. Realistically, I think it's going to be Matt Jones because, I mean, when this trade happened, you heard Matt Jones' name out there at the very beginning. That's still the name you're hearing. You've heard, Justin Fields, his name's kind of just died down, it seems like the past month or so. Trey Lance has had, occasional, reports of that. But the fact that Matt Jones' name has been there from the very beginning kind of leads to me that I think San Francisco would take Matt Jones at number 3.
I'm going to agree with you there, Jordan. And first, in addition, I want to say Blake Jude is a great broadcaster and a great guy too. I'm glad that you're friends with him. That brings me to the point. If they trade Garoppolo, then Garoppolo, I could see them taking Lance. But if they don't trade him, I can see them sticking with like a Fields or a Mac Jones.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting with the San Francisco 49ers at number 3. That's kind of – it's really interesting. I kind of think it's between Matt Jones and Trey Lance. I'm not as high on Justin Fields as, some people, but I still think he needs to be, recognized more as the 3rd pick overall. And it's kind of interesting. We already know the number 1 and number 2 pick, who is going to be. But who do you think, to me, it's very interesting. But the Atlanta Falcons would do it number 4. I've kind of said the whole time, I really think the Atlanta Falcons will take a quarterback. I know there's not been any reports by that, but I want to stand by it. I've said it since around January. I said number 4 will be a quarterback, whether it's the Atlanta Falcons or the Patriots or whoever trades up. If number 4 overall, I think will honestly be a quarterback, and I think it's going to be Trey Lance. Like I said, Trey Lance is not nearly as pro-ready as some of these other quarterbacks. And I think if he can sit behind Matt Ryan for a year or so, learn from him. Matt Ryan's been to a Super Bowl. He's been around the league for so long. He's in his mid-30s. He's won multiple, awards. I like Lance at number 4. Who do you think Atlanta will take at number 4?
That's the key to the whole draft is what Atlanta's going to do here. A lot of people are saying they're going to take Pitts. A lot of people are saying they're going to trade out of the pick. They could take one of the top 4 or 5 quarterbacks. So really, that's going to be the crux of the draft on what Atlanta does here. I almost feel like they're going to still invest in Matt Ryan for another year or two, even against my better judgment. And I think they're going to take Pitts. That if I had to make a choice, that would be my prediction.
Yeah, Pitts at 4 to me is it's a really good pick. Pitts is, in my opinion, 100% the best player available at number 4. But at the same time, I kind of think like people are like you don't have an opportunity to draft in the top 5 very often, especially if you're the Atlanta Falcons. You've had some down years past couple of seasons, but also a couple of years ago you were in the Super Bowl picking 31st overall. You do not have a chance to get a guy like Justin Fields or Trey Lance often. And I mean, who's to say they have like the 15th pick next season, and they would have to trade a ton of draft capital to get up and get a quarterback they like. They have a chance to get either Trey Lance. I would more than likely Trey Lance or Justin Fields at number 4. Matt Ryan is getting up there in age. I know he has a ridiculous contract, but another thing is, you kind of have that 5th-year option with getting a quarterback instead of opposed to getting a quarterback at round 2. I really think it should be Trey Lance, but I would not be surprised at all if it would be Kyle Pitts because Kyle Pitts is also a really great option at number 4 as well.
Totally agreed. And then that moves us to number 5 with Cincinnati. I mean, we were hoping as Bengal fans that we had our choice between Pitts, Chase, and Sewell. If Atlanta goes Pitts, then obviously our choices are a little bit less than that. And, I was Camp Sewell for a long time. I can see the logic of taking Chase as well. So at this point, it's kind of like champagne problems. Whoever they take, I'm going to be happy with, to be honest with you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. If Kyle Pitts is at 5, I mean, I love him. Jamar Chase, Penei Sewell. I'd be happy with any of the 3 because any of those 3 players are going to have immediate impact on the team, and they're going to have a major part of our future. I mean, you need those 3. You line them up with Joe Burrow, Mixon, Boyd, Higgins, Tate. I think that has potential to be one of the best offenses in a couple of years. And, we kind of talked about Atlanta being at number 4. And something I did a 3-round NFL mock draft last week with trades. The week prior, I did a 3-round mock draft that did not include trades. The one I did with trades, though, I actually had a major trade, and I had the Atlanta Falcons trading the 4th pick overall to the New England Patriots. The Patriots traded a couple of first-round picks and also cornerback Stephon Gilmore. And I think it's possible the Patriots, maybe some other teams, trade up in the draft. Or who are some teams you think may trade up in the draft?
All right. You know what, Jordan? You make a very good point. There's a few teams that I think are going to trade up, and I almost feel like this is that Patriots year where they trade up and all of a sudden, come Sunday morning, they're the talk of the draft, how brilliant they were and how they moved up and got whoever they wanted. I almost feel it. I think you could be right that they either get into the 4 position or maybe somewhere around the 7-8 position and grab the quarterback that they want. Other potentials to trade up, like I said before, are the Ravens, because they're really hungry for a top-notch receiver. And I know one could fall to them late, but I almost feel like they want to jump up a little bit early and get one of those elite guys. And then you have Washington. They could be coming up for a quarterback. And Bears, the same thing. I almost think they're going to sell out and try to get one of these top 5 quarterbacks. I don't know, just my opinions, but those are the most likely trade-ups in my opinion.
Yeah, I really like the idea of the Patriots trading up. I would actually be more surprised if the Patriots didn't trade up if they actually traded up. The Patriots were, they were so, ready in the offseason. They made tons of moves. They were playing like a win-now team in free agency by signing all those guys. They're acting like this is a Super Bowl year. If you're that aggressive in free agency, why can you not be that aggressive in the draft, which I fully expect them to will be, trading maybe with Atlanta number 4, maybe the Lions number 7 or so. Like you said, the Bears as well. I think that's a possible team. Washington, I think it may depend on how far Justin Fields drops. If Justin Fields drops out of the top 10, I really expect maybe Washington to try to trade up and get a quarterback, because Fields could learn so much from Fitzpatrick. I know it's reported that it's very unlikely going to happen now, but I also like the idea of the Dallas Cowboys trading up and getting Kyle Pitts. I know Jerry Jones loves Kyle Pitts, and I know they kind of shut down that rumor, but I think Pitts with the Dallas Cowboys offense would be absolutely phenomenal. And to me, I think it's kind of the Cowboys and the Patriots, who a couple other teams as well, like the Bears and Washington, are the most likely teams to trade up.
Yeah, you're right. And again, the Patriots and the Cowboys are used to getting national media and being the guys that trade up and get all the spotlight. I heard Jerry Jones talking, I think it was on NFL Network today, about them being excited about getting the top defensive player, but that could be a smokescreen. I definitely can feel them going for someone like Pitts, and that would be a game changer for that offense as well.
Yeah, we're less than 24 hours than the draft. We're actually less than 23 hours away from the draft now. Despite, when it's draft season, it's always smokescreen season. So, you never know. There was also reports that the Raiders are interested in lots of quarterbacks. I really don't think that'll happen, because it seems like every single season the Raiders, there's been talks and maybe they trade up, but they never do. We kind of talked about some teams who may trade up in the draft, like the Patriots, Cowboys, and Washington. But who are some teams that you think might actually trade down in the draft?
Okay, so the trade down possibilities, obviously Atlanta, because they're in that prime position. I think they control the draft totally, whether they trade down, whether they take Pitts, whether they take a quarterback, whether they trade Julio Jones, that could even have an impact on this draft. And then other teams, Miami, I know they want a wide receiver. They want Jamar Chase. If the Bengals grab him, it almost seems like Miami might have the liberty to trade down. I know they have 2 picks in the first round. Maybe they end up getting 3 picks in the first round. The Lions now, they're a possibility. And then now the Broncos, because of Bridgewater, that kind of frees them up to say, hey, let's get a couple more picks and build the roster. So those would be my trade down candidates.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think Atlanta has to be in the top 3 of teams who's maybe likely to trade down. In my opinion, I really think that if I had to pick one team who's going to trade down in the draft, if I had to pick one team who's going to have a trade in general in the NFL draft, I'm 100% taking the Detroit Lions. They are absolutely not in a win-now mode, so it's not like they have to get like a best player available scenario. If you look at the team, the Detroit Lions are clearly in a rebuild mode. One of the most teams who's going to be in rebuild in the NFL. Despite being in a rebuild seasons for the next couple of years, they actually do not have many draft picks this season. They only have one first, second, and third round pick each. For a team who's in rebuild mode, you would like to have a lot more than that. With Justin Fields falling, if he falls to 7, I think it's a possibility the Patriots offer them a couple first-round picks and maybe a couple of seconds, depending on how much they want Fields. And also with the Kyle Pitts with the Cowboys, maybe getting a second-round pick there. But the Lions, when I was doing my mock draft earlier today, the Lions are easily the hardest team in the NFL to do a mock draft for, because you just have no idea who they may get. But I really think the Lions are the most likely team to trade down.
I'm going to agree with you there because they are in rebuild mode. They're going to want to stack up picks. They seem like they're kind of set at quarterback with Goff, at least for this upcoming season. So I'm going to agree that they could be one of the candidates to trade down this season.
The talk of where the top quarterbacks will go, we already know where Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson will go. That's number 1 and number 2. Number 3 is kind of interesting. I would say it may be Matt Jones, quarterback of Alabama. But where do you think some of these top quarterbacks may end up going?
I know this is going to sound crazy, but I don't know if any of these 5 quarterbacks are going to go past the first 10 picks. And, as you look at the later part of, like 6, 7, 8, 9, those teams don't necessarily need quarterbacks at this point, but there could be teams that trade up to get them. It's such a premium on that position right now that I don't know if I see like Justin Fields slipping to 12, 13, 14. It just feels like all of them are going top 10. I could be wrong, but that's just my gut feeling on it.
So when I did my mock draft today, I actually had Justin Fields going to the Patriots at 15. The only reason I had him going to 15 is because I really don't like doing mock drafts with trades. I think they're unrealistic and they're too hard to predict. But if I had to do a trade, I think Justin Fields would be in the top 10. I don't think Justin Fields drops out of the top 10 due to a trade that we talked about with the Patriots, Washington, the Bears. Maybe a team like that, trades back. You kind of mentioned with the Broncos, number 9, to get some more picks right now and in the future. But obviously, Lawrence and Wilson are going 1 and 2. I would say probably going to be Matt Jones at number 3. Everybody's talking about Justin Fields, where he's going to go. He's dropping. I'm very, very intrigued where Trey Lance is going to go. I wouldn't be shocked if the Patriots traded up to get Trey Lance instead of Justin Fields, depending, where that pick is. Because Trey Lance, to me, I think he's better than Justin Fields, but I think Justin Fields is better off right now because he's more pro-ready, playing in a much bigger competition. But I would say Fields maybe to the Patriots if I had to guess. And, that would just absolutely suck because the AFC, if Justin Fields started right now, I honestly think the Patriots could easily get in the playoffs and maybe even win the AFC East. I know that sounds crazy, but, look at the team they signed in free agency. Trey Lance is very intriguing. I kind of like the idea of the Lions if they stay put. I like Lance maybe there. But I also mentioned Lance to the Falcons as well, and Matt Jones to San Francisco. These top 5 quarterbacks, specifically Lance and Justin Fields, are very difficult on determining where they may end up going.
100%. And, I don't know if it's the Patriot way to throw Cam Newton in there to start another year. So I don't know if Lance is their guy and they want to wait around and, have another kind of struggle season with Newton. I would think they would go for Fields over him. But again, I'm not in the war room with Kraft and Belichick. So that's just my speculation.
There's going to be at least 5 quarterbacks drafted in the first round. There's going to be more than likely 5 of them just in the first 10 picks. So if you had to guess, wide receiver, quarterback, or edge rusher, what position do you think gets drafted most in the first round?
That's tough. And again, when you have quarterback and edge rusher, those are 2 premier positions. I consider quarterback, edge rusher, a cover corner, and a left tackle to be the premier positions in the NFL. But based on this draft, I'm almost feeling like, we're going to get 5 quarterbacks. I almost feel like we're going to get 5 wide receivers. I don't think we're going to get 5 edge rushers in the first round.
And I know it sounds crazy. Part of the reason why I don't think we're going to see 5 edge rushers in the first round is because this class is so good. I know it sounds weird saying, there's so many great players. There's not going to be a lot in the first round. But once you actually think about it, it kind of makes some sense because it's very similar to last season's wide receiver class. You look at teams in the first round who decided not to select that wide receiver in the first round and then maybe take one later on. Wide receiver class reminds me a lot of the edge rushing. This edge class reminds me a lot of the wide receiver class last season, where instead of taking one early, the depth of this class is so great. People maybe take one in the 3rd and 4th. Wide receiver, I think we'll probably see 5, maybe 6, depending. Maybe the Packers, Ravens, some of those late round selection teams take one. Quarterbacks, I think we're going to see 5. But if I had to guess, I would probably say wide receivers at 6 because you have Chase, Devontae Smith, Waddle, Bateman, Harris Marshall Jr., and I would throw either Elijah Moore or Kadarius Toney in that mix as well.
I agree with you. I thought Marshall was going to slip to the 2nd round and hoping that he's in there. If the Bengals draft Sewell in the 1st, that would be nice to see him there in the 2nd. But aside from that, I think you nailed the top wide receivers, definitely. And most of them should be 1st round or early 2nd.
So, we're kind of talking about the 1st round here. And, there are so many players who are good. And, there are some players, honestly, who are overrated. And despite being in the 1st round, there's even some players who are underrated. Everybody seems like they always talk about, 1st round talent. But who are some players to you, maybe in the later rounds, who you think are really like late round sleepers that people are not talking about enough, who has potential to be really good in the NFL?
Well, Jordan, I'm not a college football expert, so I'm not going to dig into the deep rounds with a lot of these players. But there are a handful of players that I don't think are going to get drafted in the 1st round that might be deserving of getting drafted in the 1st round. So Javonte Williams, he could be the best of all 3 of those running backs. Obviously, Terrace Marshall could be one of those. Pat Freiermuth, Jalen Mayfield. He almost seems like an Orlando Brown type who didn't kill it at the combine, a little bit sloppy, but one of those grinders that you're going to want on your offensive line for years to come. Alex Leatherman, I don't know, he's a Cincinnati favorite. I saw him get interviewed. He was someone that you just took a liking to, hoping that maybe we get him in the 2nd or 3rd round. Kwity Paye, he's obviously going to be a 1st rounder, but I think he's going to slip down a little further than he should. Micah Parsons, the same thing. You know what? I could see him going to the Vikings. I could see him slipping that far because everyone's preoccupied with the corners and the quarterbacks and the receivers. And, you watch Zimmer go for one of those elite defenders, and he could make a big difference out there. And then, Nick Bolton, Jabril Cox, they always have a warm spot for those LSU guys. And then the other one is Morig, the safety. They're saying he could be like another Fitzpatrick. I know I'm talking about guys that are like on the cusp of 1st round, but I think these are guys that the league is kind of pushing a little bit to the back of the 1st round, early 2nd round, that could be major players. So, if you're asking me for my list of sleepers, that would be the list that I would give you at this point, Jordan.
You mentioned Trevor Morig, the safety from TCU. In my opinion, he's the best safety, in this draft class. Despite being the best player at his position, I actually think he is extremely underrated. I think he's capable of being a top 20 draft pick, but it's just, not many teams need safety, so that's why he may slide. You mentioned some other players as well. Micah Parsons, you mentioned him. He had a sensational pro day at Penn State, but I would be surprised if he drops past 15. If the Patriots stay put and don't select the quarterback, I would not be surprised if Micah Parsons goes to New England. But you also got to look at Micah Parsons' off the field issues that are not being talked about at all for whatever reason. I truly do not understand why they're not being talked about. Because if they're true, in my opinion, he should never play in the NFL. But a couple guys I really like. I really like Jalen Darden, the wide receiver from North Texas. You watch his playing style, his size. He reminds me so much of Tyreek Hill. Doing these Bengals mock drafts. I've been doing post-free agency mock drafts for each NFL team. Jalen Darden is a player who's come up quite often on my mock drafts because I think he is extremely talented. I think he has potential to be the next Tyreek Hill. I also like Patrick Jones a lot, the edge rusher from Pittsburgh. I do not understand why he's dropping so much on people's big boards. About 2 months ago, he was projected a mid-second round pick. Now I'm seeing mock drafts having him in the 4th or 5th round. I like him a lot. He's somebody I would love the Bengals to get. Even in his bad games, he'll still get you a sack and a couple quarterback pressures. Quentin Morris, a tight end from Bowling Green, had a really nice performance at the Senior Bowl, very athletic. Actually hurdled a defender during the Senior Bowl. To me, in the draft, I was kind of like looking at late round prospects because it's always kind of fun looking at late round guys and kind of like predicting, that guy's going to be really good, and then like you're right about it. I kind of like studying the late round guys more, honestly, than some of the earlier guys.
No, totally. I hear what you're saying, and that is the fun. If you can grab one of those gems in, like, the 5th or the 6th rounds, you get yourself like a Tom Brady, or you get yourself like an Alvin Kamara in I think he got drafted 3rd round. So there's definitely room for that. Philosophically, though, I feel like you need to get your players in the 1st and 2nd round. I mean, at least as far as the Bengals go, I've charted their picks for the last decade, and they haven't had too many productive players in rounds 3 through 7. So I don't know if they're exactly a microcosm for the whole league, but I don't get your guys in the 1st and 2nd round. I've been saying, give me 3 good picks in round 1 and 2, and I don't even care about 3 through 7. I know you build your roster through the draft and stuff like that, but I'm like a top of the draft guy. I'm like a top 50 guy. Everything after that is really just kind of like a crapshoot.
And, people talk about late round picks, 5th, 6th, 7th round, they might not be important. And, I kind of mentioned Quentin Morris of Bowling Green tight end. You notice, some of the best tight ends in the NFL were actually late round picks. Travis Kelce, George Kittle, Darren Waller. None of those guys were 1st round picks. Would not be surprised if Quentin Morris would have a pretty nice successful career in the NFL. And something, with those late round picks, to me, I never, ever think teams should ever draft team needs in rounds 5, 6, and 7. Debatable in round 4, honestly. To me, you always take best player available because let's say rounds 5, 6, and 7, despite being picked in those rounds, you're not even guaranteed to make the team. To me, I mean, if you always draft best player available in those rounds because they're much more likely to have contributions on a team. Despite not being a team need, they're much more likely to end up making the team. For example, Auden Tate, several years ago, we drafted him in the 7th round, wide receiver. We didn't need him. He was definitely the best player available. And, despite his limited snaps, he's had a pretty successful career with the Cincinnati Bengals so far.
You're 100% right. I totally agree with you on best player available, even at the top of the draft. Even this year when the Bengals are faced with Pitts and Chase and Sewell, whoever they have highest rated, take them. You have to go that way. I think that's the wise choice. And especially in the later rounds, you want to continue that philosophy of getting the best guys that are out there rather than reaching for players. But I think you should also have a limit to it. Like, obviously, the Bengals aren't going to take the best player if he's a quarterback or maybe even a safety. You get your positions. Like, I think for Cincinnati in particular, if I may talk about them, quarterback, corner, and safety right now, they're probably not going to draft one of those guys unless some amazing player falls in their lap. But aside from that, pretty much any other position is fair game.
Speaking of best player available, Virginia Tech cornerback Caleb Farley, he's supposedly, dropping due to injury concerns. I honestly do not see him going past 29 to the Green Bay Packers. I know it sounds crazy, but that's one of those scenarios, that's a team need. A wide receiver. Yep, excuse me. The Green Bay Packers need a wide receiver, but Caleb Farley, if he's there at 29, is 100% going to be the best player available. I think they should definitely take a guy who's best player available over a team need scenario. If Caleb Farley would drop to the 2nd round, the corner from Virginia Tech, if you're the Bengals, if you take Chase at 5, which looks like that's going to happen, you think the Bengals should take Caleb Farley in the 2nd round if he drops to them of their 2nd round pick?
Truthfully, I think they would be crucified if they're going to grab Chase in the first round and they don't grab an offensive lineman after that. That's almost considered negligence. And what if something, God forbid, what if something happened to Burrow this year after the only new lineman we added was Riley Reef, and then the next lineman is a third rounder based on the scenario you described. That would be negligence. And Farley, he's supposed to be the best of all three, but back injuries are tough. You don't know how guys are going to recover from that. I haven't been privy to his medical diagnosis, but a couple surgeries on your back, at age 20, 21, that's scary stuff. So if the Bengals go Chase in round 1, they have to go offensive line in round 2. If they don't, it could be a public relations nightmare, and it could be a major problem for them on the field as well.
Me, I'm not totally against taking Caleb Farley because to me, I know that back injuries are extremely concerning. Back surgery is one of the worst injuries to come back from and playing in football. But if you get Farley and Chase, those are 2 top 15 players you get with your first 2 picks. And you mentioned getting Chase with the first round pick and have to get a offensive lineman in round 2. That's kind of why I do not like the idea of getting Chase. I wouldn't be against it, but that's kind of my pros and cons. That's my con of getting Chase at 5 is because you're pressured, you're forced, you have to take an offensive lineman in round 2, whether it's a reach or not. That's kind of my issue with taking Chase at 5.
You're actually totally correct. If they take Chase at 5, they have to take a lineman at 2 and maybe even at 3. So that is going to pigeonhole them. If they take Sewell at 1, now you're free. Maybe you grab a top-notch corner if one falls in the second round. Maybe you get an edge rusher if one of those 5 or 6 guys falls. Maybe you get there's several positions. Maybe you get the wide receiver there as well. Terrace Marshall or whoever. But I agree with you. If they take Chase in the first round, they're really showing their hand on what they're going to do for the next couple rounds.
And it's going to be really interesting to see what the Bengals do. And there's going to be, in my opinion, I think there's going to be quite a few surprises as we the first day of the draft, whether it's trade down, trade up, whatever. Maybe a player drops, like we mentioned, Caleb Farley. But there's reports that edge rusher from Georgia, Azeez Ojulari, could drop as well due to some injury concerns. But if you had the biggest surprise in the draft, what do you think the biggest surprise of the draft may end up being?
You know what? You're kind of stumping me on that question. Are you saying for the Bengals or for the entire draft?
The entire draft in general.
You know what? I think you might see a 6th quarterback creep into the first round. I know that sounds crazy, but everyone's quarterback crazy right now. I know you got a couple guys on the cusp that they don't even think are going to be near first round, like you got Davis Mills and Trask and Mond. But I'm almost feeling like one of those guys is going to go higher than expected. Maybe not first round, but definitely way higher than they kind of should go because, again, the premium on that position. So that would be my prediction for a surprise in this draft.
Mine is kind of, I would say, off the rails. I would say the Patriots trading cornerback Stephon Gilmore. I know it sounds crazy, but like I mentioned, on my 3-round mock draft with trades, I had Gilmore going to the Atlanta Falcons in a trade because the Falcons desperately need corner help. I've seen some people have the Falcons taking a corner at number 4. That is just so stupid. We're talking about best player available. That is, Caleb Farley, Patrick Surtain, J.C. Horn. Even if Caleb Farley is healthy, he's not worthy of the 4th pick overall. The Falcons, I think they can maybe use a Stephon Gilmore in a trade with the Patriots because the Patriots, if they trade Gilmore, they can kind of free up some cap space. And Gilmore only has 1 year left. And also, maybe the Lions take Gilmore. Gilmore only has, like I just said, only has 1 year in his contract. If you're able to re-sign Stephon Gilmore of the Detroit Lions and a trade back with the New England Patriots, all of a sudden, you have Jeffrey Okudah, the 3rd pick overall last season from Ohio State. You get Stephon Gilmore. You got Brockers from the Rams. You're going to have lots of draft capital if you trade back with the New England Patriots. All of a sudden, this rebuild for the Detroit Lions, their defense has been horrendous for years now. But I mean, if that were to happen, you all of a sudden get a pretty nice defense in Detroit.
Great point. I mean, if they were to grab Gilmore, that would really help that secondary. It's just, I don't know. The Patriots are a pretty crafty team. Forgive the pun there. And again, going back to my philosophy, you don't get rid of your left tackles. You don't get rid of your cover corners. You don't get rid of your quarterbacks. Those marquee positions, your edge rushers. So, I mean, who knows what's going to happen? That would be their main chip to throw in if they do want to move up. But if I was the GM, I wouldn't get rid of a top-notch corner. That's crazy in today's NFL. I mean, you need like 3 good corners nowadays. It's not even having a good guy. If you don't have a good slot guy, you're going to get eaten alive underneath.
With Stephon Gilmore, possibly being traded, I do highly think I do not think it would happen, but it's something I have talked about. That would only happen if the Patriots traded up to a team that needs a corner. He has 1 year's contract, and with the trade, the Patriots would keep their second-round pick. They pick around, I believe, 46 or so, something like that. And Asante Samuel Jr., the corner from Florida State, Eric Stokes from Georgia. With Caleb Farley dropping, that may mean some other corners back drop as well. So with that trade, I think it is possible, kind of how we talked about with the Baltimore Ravens. They traded Orlando Brown, and then they're more likely going to replace Brown by getting a tackle on round 1. Maybe that's kind of scenario for the Patriots possibly doing. With Stephon Gilmore being traded, they get a corner in round 2 though. But it's who knows. That's only kind of a scenario if the Patriots trade up.
And you're right. I mean, if they were to grab like a Stokes or a Samuel, part of here's my philosophy on this. Part of coaching is the X's and O's, and part of it is teaching guys, right? And we've learned that over time. The Patriots are good teachers. That's why they don't have. I don't even know if they've had a first-round pick make the Pro Bowl in a long time. I think it's a matter of them being great teachers. Same thing with Pittsburgh, unfortunately. As Bengal fans, definitely not my favorite team in the world. But for some reason, they just keep churning out good players. And again, it's part scheme, but it's a lot teaching. So maybe you're right there. Maybe the Patriots in particular could grab a second-round corner. And because of the tutelage and that whole system, they could probably turn him into something similar to Gilmore. So yes, you bring up interesting points there. If I was the Bengals and I had Gilmore, I wouldn't get rid of him. But maybe the Patriots could be in that position based on the fact of the way they bring players into this league and get them ready for the NFL.
It's going to be really interesting, the surprises in the NFL, because I feel sure that there's going to be quite a few. You mentioned possibly, a 6th quarterback being drafted in the first round with Davis Mills, quarterback at Stanford. I would not be shocked if he was drafted in the first round. I've seen some reports have him going there. I don't really understand it though, but I think it is certainly possible. I know, this episode, we kind of talked about the Orlando Brown trade going to the Kansas City Chiefs, the Teddy Bridgewater trade going to the Denver Broncos, and if Denver should still take a quarterback. Who does San Francisco and Atlanta take at picks 3 and 4? Teams who are most likely to trade up, teams who are most likely to trade down. Where some of the top quarterbacks will go in the NFL draft? What position gets picked most in round 1? Some late round sleepers, and the biggest surprise in the NFL draft. It's now less than 22 hours away. It's absolutely crazy. After this, I'm going to go watch Draft Day, the movie. Haven't seen that quite some time to prepare myself for the draft. So, Frank, can you tell some of the listeners who can follow you on social media?
Yes. The name of my podcast is the Unofficial Bengals Podcast, and you can find me on Twitter or Instagram at Cincy Bengals Pod. And Jordan, just to bring up one other point, how you feeling about a 6'6" quarterback? I know Herbert kind of broke the mold and had a good year, but some of those guys have such a long delivery. I worry about. There hasn't been many guys over 6'5" that have been successful. I know Lawrence is probably going to be good, but what are you feeling about those large quarterbacks?
It's kind of interesting because people talk about size of quarterback. You have to have it. You have to be at least over 6 foot. But then there's also a thing. People talk about you're too big. I remember a couple years ago, Buffalo quarterback Tyree Jackson came out he was one of my favorite quarterbacks coming out of the draft. He's 6'7", 250, and people are saying he's too big to play quarterback. But I mean, you look at Russell Wilson. Some people are saying he's too small. It's kind of, I don't know. It's really interesting. But Tyree Jackson, he was one player I always thought had a chance to be really good. Never got an opportunity because he was actually too big. That's something you just don't really hear often from quarterbacks. Personally, in my opinion, I would much rather have a 6'5" guy rather than a 5'10" or 5'11" guy, something like that.
No, great point. You get one of those pocket passers that can just throw the ball anywhere on the field. And if you saw Lawrence's pro day, he was throwing dimes. I'm a guy who watches quarterbacks more than any other position, and he was just throwing the ball sharp. Again, man, I appreciate you having me on. Really respect your knowledge. Definitely a good time, my friend.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely try to have you on. I thank you all. Thanks so much for joining. We'll have to do this again sometime. This was a great episode. Thank you all so much for listening. Tuning in to this pre-draft special with Frank from the Unofficial Bengals Podcast. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. I would really, really appreciate it. And I will see you all next time on the Sports Dude Hines Show.